Hi, my name is Jon Mann. I'm 24 years old, which makes me a millennial male. And there's a few things that all millennial males, pretty easy stereotypes. I love the show Family Guy. I listen to a lot of Kanye West. And if any of you guys are rude to me tonight, I'm going to go home and tweet about you. When I was 4 years old, I saw a movie for the first time that I had no idea was going to continue to shape my life up until 2 weeks ago when I watched it again, and that movie was Jaws. And Jaws came out in 1975, and it was directed by a guy named Steven Spielberg. And I hope I'm saying that correctly. And this movie was a huge cultural phenomenon, and like many other people, at 4 years old, I was terrified to go swimming for a long time. I still don't feel completely comfortable unless I can see my toes. And about 10 years later, I watched the movie again, and it had a completely different hold on my life, because at that time, I was about 13, 14, I was starting to write a lot, and I was really starting to get into what it meant to make movies. And around the same time, I was reading a lot of Stephen King, and I was thinking, like, I was so scared of these Stephen King books, but they had such a grip on you that you're holding it and you can put it down at any time. So what is it about us that is so obsessed with stories? And at the same time, 14, 15 years old, I went on a family vacation to Florida, and we went to Universal Studios, probably because I complained about it the whole time until we would go. And it was really cool because we were right on the Universal lot, and I was able to see all these old sets. And of course, Universal Studios produced Jaws. And there's a Jaws ride at Universal Studios in Orlando that I was so terrified of that I'm not above admitting that I cried. And it really started to get me thinking, like, what is it with the psychology of movies that it hits you at such a core level that can terrify you, even when you know it's fake and it came out 14 years before you were even born. A few years later, I enrolled into political science at Acadia, and after graduation, I did what most political science students do, and I moved back into my parents' basement. And it was while I was living there that I really started to think about maybe it's time to take my love for movies one step further. So I enrolled at the New York Film Academy to study screenwriting, and lo and behold, my first piece of homework was to study the screenplay of Jaws. And at the same time, I was starting to do some research on my first feature documentary called Project Power, which documented the social movement against the sale of MB Power to Hydro-Quebec. And I started to see some blaring similarities between the movie Jaws and social movements around the world, whether it was what was going on in New Brunswick or what was going on in Madison, Wisconsin with the workers' rights at the time, and even what's going on in Hong Kong right now. So if you look at Jaws, it's really about three central characters, and one of them is Chief Brody, who's a chief of police, and it's very subtly put into the film that he had left the New York NYPD because he felt like he wasn't making enough of a difference, so he moved to this small coastal town in New England. The second character is a man named Hooper, who is a master's biology student who is obsessed with information. He's obsessed with sharks. He wants to know absolutely everything that he can about this species. And then you have Quint, who is a retired Navy alcoholic fisherman who became involved once there was a bounty put on the shark's head. So he was very financially motivated to go out and hunt this shark. And what you started to see is these three men who absolutely hated each other. So what was it about this story that got them to get into a rickety old fishing boat to go kill a 2-ton man-eating shark? And when you start to really dissect it, you see that Chief Brody was very influenced by his community. He's influenced by his family. Like every Spielberg movie, there's a father-son family relation going on. And he wanted to make a difference, so he was motivated by his community. When you look at Quint, he was motivated financially. He didn't even care. He doesn't have a family. He was isolated from the community. So you weren't going to get him there by promising that the community was going to be safe. He was completely financially motivated. And then you have Hooper, who is obsessed with knowledge and information and is really motivated by that. And when I was interviewing people for Project Power, I started to see the exact same thing. There were people who talked about living in New Brunswick for 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and they said that this was the first time that they really felt that New Brunswick was kind of under attack. And what was so unbelievable is that some may argue that they were being attacked by their own government. And they said, like, if we lose the power, our sovereignty over our power, then are we even really a province? If we can't control our power, then what can we control? And then we had others who told me that they were a little bit worried. They worked for MB Power. If it was to go to Hydro-Quebec, they were worried about their livelihood and their jobs, which is completely understandable. And then you had engineers who just thought that it didn't make any sense. The dollar figure put on MB Power just was completely off. And then you had a lot of professors who were just interested in the knowledge, and a lot of people outside of the province that were so interested in seeing a deal of this magnitude go through that they just wanted to learn everything, every single possible thing that they could about a deal this size. So you start to see that community, being motivated by community, finances, or knowledge really drives every single social movement in the world. And there's a quote by Margaret Mead who said that you never dismay a group of small individuals who feel as if they can change the world. Indeed, they are the only things that ever have. So if you start to look at in the example of Jaws, where you take a semi-retired chief of police, an alcoholic sailor, and a marine biology student who went out and were able to kill this 2-ton man-eating shark, it's the same thing that we're seeing every single day in social movements across the world, where it is the average individual, the small groups of individuals that are starting to make a difference. And we're at a very interesting time in world history where the underdogs are starting to have a glaring majority. You always hear about the 99% versus the 1%. And I think that it's time that we really put our hands on the wheel. We have to have fun as underdogs. We have to appreciate being an underdog, because I really think that a lot of these issues that we're facing in the world, we are going to need a bigger boat. Thank you very much.